My name is Eleanor Matthews, and 2 months ago I sat on a plane next to my husband, and the woman he swore was just a coworker. He told me he was going on a business trip, but instead he was taking her on what looked very much like a lover's getaway. The catch: I had the seat right beside them, and the flight attendant introduced me as his legal wife in front of everyone. That was the moment my 17-year marriage ended, not with slammed doors or screaming arguments, but 30,000 feet in the air where there was nowhere left for him to run. But stories like this don't just appear out of thin air. They build brick by brick in the quiet cracks of a marriage. To outsiders, our life looked enviable. We had a 3-bedroom home on the edge of Denver's suburbs, a golden retriever who greeted us every evening, and steady careers that made our neighbors call us the reliable couple. I was a senior administrator at a local community college, working with faculty and students on programs I truly believed in. My husband David was a regional sales director for a technology company, the kind of man who carried a leather briefcase and shook hands firmly with strangers at barbecues. We had been together long enough to fall into rhythms that seemed unbreakable: Saturday morning farmers markets, Wednesday takeout nights, annual anniversary trips to the mountains. But marriage is not just what people see from the outside. I started noticing the small changes first. David had always been attentive in his own way, never a poet but thoughtful. He used to text me during trips a quick "landed safe" or "wish you were here." Those texts dwindled. Instead, his phone became an extra limb never left unattended. He would tilt it away from me when a message came in, laugh too quickly, or silence it altogether. When I asked, he brushed it off with "just work." Clients are demanding. He began traveling more too. In the early years, a business trip meant once every few months, planned well in advance, often with some souvenir or story when he returned. But lately, there had been trips every other week. Chicago, Dallas, Seattle destinations so frequent I couldn't keep them straight. When I asked who he was meeting, his answers were vague. Potential clients, strategy sessions, always just enough to close the subject. Then there were the scents. Faint traces of perfume that didn't belong to me lingered on his dress shirts. I once noticed lipstick smudged faintly near his collar. When I mentioned it, he laughed too loudly and said it must have been from brushing against someone's jacket at a networking dinner. My instincts told me otherwise. Still, I convinced myself not to overreact. We had nearly 2 decades together. We raised children, paid off a mortgage, weathered recessions and health scares. People like us didn't implode over suspicions. We were solid. At least I wanted to believe we were. One evening, as we cleared dinner plates, David mentioned casually, "I'll be in San Francisco next week. Just a short trip, 2 nights tops. Some big meetings with a new client in biotech." San Francisco. My heart gave a strange thud. He hadn't traveled there in years. "Who's going with you?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. He hesitated. "Just me and the team. Nothing unusual. You know how these things go." He avoided eye contact, focusing instead on rinsing his glass. I wanted to push further, but instead I nodded, forcing a smile. "Don't forget to pack a jacket. It's colder than you think this time of year." That night, as he packed, I noticed what he laid out on the bed. Crisp shirts, yes, but also casual clothes. I rarely saw him wear on trips: jeans, a navy polo, even sneakers. He folded them with care, humming quietly to himself. Something about the sight unsettled me. Business trips didn't usually require weekend wear. When he left the room, I brushed my fingers over his suitcase, pausing at a small gift bag tucked near the side pocket. A delicate ribbon tied it closed. My breath caught. I didn't open it. I wasn't ready to see what was inside, but the shape told me it was jewelry. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling long after he fell asleep beside me. The sound of his steady breathing, once comforting, now felt foreign, like listening to a stranger. Questions swirled in my mind. Who was he buying jewelry for? Was this trip really about business? I told myself I needed proof before I could confront him. Proof that would leave no room for excuses, no possibility of smooth explanations, because David was skilled at making wrong things sound logical, wrapping lies in business jargon and practiced smiles. And deep down I feared the truth because once spoken aloud it would change everything. The morning of his flight I kissed him goodbye at the door as I always did. His embrace was brief, distracted. "Don't wait up for me," he said lightly. "I'll call you from the hotel." I watched his car disappear down the street, the taillights glowing red in the dawn mist. A hollowness settled in my chest, a feeling I couldn't shake. That evening, while tidying up, I noticed he had left his tablet on the kitchen counter screen, lit with a faint glow. I shouldn't have looked. I had never been the wife who snooped. But something about the device, abandoned and glowing like a secret begging to be revealed, pulled me toward it. I tapped the screen. His calendar opened instantly, no password required. And what I saw made the room tilt. It wasn't just one ticket to San Francisco, it was two. I stood frozen in the kitchen, the tablet glowing against the dim light of evening. The calendar entry stared back at me like a cruel joke. Flight 246 Denver to San Francisco. Seats 3A and 3B. Passenger names David Matthews and Claire Bennett. Claire. The name sank into me like ice. I knew her. Not well, but enough. She worked in his office, marketing associate, maybe 10 years younger than me. She'd been at the last company holiday party wearing a shimmering silver dress and laughing a little too easily at David's stories. I had thought nothing of it then. Just another young colleague eager to impress her boss. But here she was, her name printed right beside his. Business class. Same row. Same flight. The sound of the refrigerator humming felt deafening in the silence. I scrolled further, my hands trembling. Confirmation emails sent to his personal account, reservation confirmed for 2 passengers. Enjoy your trip to San Francisco. Attached was an itinerary for the hotel. Not the standard business hotel his company usually booked, but a boutique place with rooftop views and a spa package. A place designed for romance, not meetings. The edges of my vision blurred. My knees nearly gave out as I sank into the nearest chair. I remembered the jewelry bag tucked into his suitcase. Suddenly the shape was obvious. A necklace perhaps, or earrings wrapped with a ribbon. Not for me. For her. A metallic ringing filled my ears, drowning out rational thought. I pressed my palms to the cool surface of the table, grounding myself. 17 years of marriage, children, raised mortgages, paid anniversaries celebrated. All of it now reduced to a single entry on a flight reservation. I wanted to scream, to hurl the tablet against the wall, to storm into the airport and drag him back by the collar. But instead, a strange calmness swept over me, sharp and cold. No, I thought. I won't give him the satisfaction of chaos. Not tears. Not begging. If he wants to play this game, I'll make sure he never forgets who he betrayed. The more I sat with it, the clearer it became. Rage was useless if it only lived inside me. But if I used it carefully, deliberately, I could turn it into something else. Something devastating. I replayed the details. Flight 246. San Francisco. Seats 3A and 3B. Boutique hotel. 2 nights. It wasn't just betrayal, it was planning. Thought out. He had chosen to lie to look me in the eye while promising work obligations, all while arranging a lover's getaway. I stood pacing the kitchen, my mind racing. I imagined them boarding together, laughing, whispering as they clinked champagne glasses 30,000 feet in the air. My chest burned. But then a thought struck me. What if I was there too? Right beside them. Not hidden. Not sneaking. In plain sight. The image filled me with a twisted kind of exhilaration. Him trapped in a metal tube with nowhere to escape. Her shifting in her seat as I smiled sweetly from the aisle. And the other passengers watching, judging, silently siding with me. My heart pounded with a new rhythm now, not just of hurt, but of strategy. I grabbed my phone, scrolling through the airline's booking site. It was late, but there it was, Flight 246, Denver to San Francisco. Business class nearly full, but one seat remained. 3C, right beside them. My finger hovered over the purchase button, the cursor blinking like destiny itself. I hesitated for a moment, my mind flashing images of the fallout, the confrontation, the shame. Did I have the strength to sit through it? Then I remembered the hollow way he kissed me goodbye that morning, the way he hummed while folding casual clothes, packing jewelry for someone else. And I pressed, confirm. A weight lifted. My breathing steadied. For the first time in weeks, I felt control. I printed the confirmation email, folded it neatly, and slid it into my purse like a weapon. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I ate nothing, pacing the living room until the clock read midnight. Finally, I sat with a notebook and began to plan. Not a dramatic outburst, not a scene ripped from a cheap soap opera. This would be precise. A slow reveal. I would let him trap himself in his own lies. I rehearsed the possibilities. What would I wear? How would I greet him? What words would slice deepest without ever raising my voice? I imagined turning to the flight attendant with a calm smile. Would you mind introducing me? After all, I am his legal wife. The thought alone gave me chills of satisfaction. When I finally crawled into bed, the space beside me cold and empty, I stared at the ceiling in the dark. For the first time, instead of feeling powerless, I felt ready. David thought he was flying away from me, but what he didn't know was that I'd be right there waiting in the seat beside him. The morning sun streamed through the blinds, but I had barely slept. My mind had been churning all night, running through every possible scenario. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw them together on that plane, her hand brushing his smile curved toward her, the same smile he used to save only for me. By dawn, my resolve was steel. If he wanted to make a spectacle of our marriage, then I would make sure it was a spectacle on my terms. I sat at the kitchen table with a steaming cup of coffee, pen in hand, and began to draft what I called the plan. It was simple, but elegant, more effective than any shouted argument could ever be. Step 1. Secure my seat. I had already booked it the night before, seat 3C, the one directly beside them. Still, paranoia whispered that the airline might shuffle things around, so I called the airline, my voice calm and professional. Good morning, this is Eleanor Matthews. I just booked seat 3C on flight 246 tomorrow. I wanted to confirm that the seating arrangement will remain unchanged. The agent's voice was cheerful, oblivious to the storm swirling beneath my tone. Yes, ma'am, you are confirmed in 3C. Would you like to add any special requests to your reservation? I smiled, though she couldn't see me. Yes. Could you please add a note that I'll be celebrating an important occasion? I'd like the flight crew to be aware. She typed quickly. Of course, ma'am. Noted. An occasion indeed. Step 2. Appearance. This wasn't about beauty or seduction. This was about armor. I rummaged through my closet until I found the perfect outfit, a sleek navy dress, modest but powerful, paired with pearl earrings my mother had given me. They weren't flashy, but they carried weight, history, permanence. Unlike the cheap sparkle of an office fling. I added a silk scarf in soft gray, something that whispered sophistication rather than desperation. I stood before the mirror, staring at my reflection. My face looked older than I remembered, lines etched from years of raising children, paying bills, keeping a household afloat. But there was strength there too, a firmness in my eyes. I wasn't just David's wife. I was a woman who had weathered storms. Step 3. Composure. I knew emotions would boil under the surface, but I refused to let them spill uncontrolled. If I screamed, he could dismiss me as hysterical. If I wept, he could pity me. But if I stayed calm, deliberate, even polite, then every word I spoke would cut like a blade sharpened by restraint. I practiced in the mirror. Good morning, David. Small world, isn't it? Or, oh, Claire, so nice to see you outside of the office. Each phrase delivered with a measured tone, a subtle smile. Step 4. The coup de grace. At the right moment, I would call the flight attendant over my voice steady. Would you mind introducing me to my seatmates? After all, I am Mr. Matthews's legal wife. The thought made my chest tighten with a heady mix of dread and exhilaration. The day crawled forward, each hour stretched taut with anticipation. I took a leave from work, feigning a sudden cold. My colleagues expressed concern, none knowing I was preparing for the most important performance of my life. That afternoon, I called my sister, my closest confidant, though I didn't reveal everything. I'm taking a short trip, I said casually. Just need some time for myself. Good for you, she replied warmly. You deserve a break. Don't forget to actually enjoy it. Enjoyment wasn't the word, but I thanked her nonetheless. As evening fell, I laid out everything with meticulous care, boarding pass, printed ID ready, outfit pressed and hanging by the door. In my purse, I placed the folded itinerary. I'd discovered proof of his betrayal, not that I intended to show it. The truth was already enough. I ordered takeout for dinner, barely tasting the food as I pushed it around the plate. My appetite had long fled, replaced by a restless energy that coursed through me. When the house grew quiet, I wandered into our bedroom. His side of the closet gaped with absence hangers bare where he had pulled shirts and jackets. On the nightstand, his wedding band's imprint lingered faintly in the wood, where he sometimes set it aside. I ran my finger over it, a ghost of what we once were. Memories flooded back unbidden. The day he proposed, stammering nervously in the rain. Our first home paint on our clothes as we laughed through exhaustion. Nights staying up late with colicky babies whispering promises to each other in the dark. All of it now mocked by his choice to share plane tickets and hotel suites with someone else. I closed the closet door firmly. That chapter was done. Before bed, I sent a discreet email to the airline's customer service. Dear Sir or Madam, I am booked on Flight 246, Seat 3C. My husband is traveling with his colleague in the adjacent seats. I would appreciate it if the crew could acknowledge me as his spouse during service. Thank you for your discretion. It was bold, perhaps outrageous, but if the universe had given me this stage, I was going to make sure the spotlight revealed everything. I slid under the covers, the house unnervingly still. Sleep came in fragments broken by dreams of turbulent skies and whispered laughter. Yet every time I woke, I reminded myself tomorrow there would be no more shadows. Tomorrow David would face me in the one place he couldn't walk away. The morning of the flight arrived gray and cold, the kind of dawn that smelled faintly of rain and jet fuel. I woke before the alarm, heart pounding with that strange cocktail of dread and determination. As I dressed, the navy dress slid over my skin like armor. I wrapped the gray silk scarf around my neck, smoothed my hair into a low bun, and clipped on the pearl earrings. The woman staring back at me in the mirror didn't look like someone about to break. She looked like someone about to deliver a verdict. The drive to the airport felt both endless and far too short. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles pale, while my thoughts spun faster than the highway beneath me. Part of me wanted to turn around to bury what I had discovered, to pretend ignorance was safety. But another voice, steady and insistent, reminded me, 17 years. Lies deserve the light. At the parking garage, I hauled my small carry-on from the trunk. Inside was nothing extravagant, just essentials. This wasn't a vacation. This was an execution of truth. The terminal buzzed with early travelers, families wrangling strollers, business people in suits, students lugging backpacks. I moved among them like a ghost, my boarding pass folded neatly in my hand. I passed through security with a forced smile, shoes in the bin, laptop out, all motions mechanical. My body moved on autopilot, but inside, adrenaline coursed. At Gate 42, the destination board glowed, Flight 246, San Francisco, on time. My stomach flipped. And then I saw them. David and Claire sat near the window, his hand casually draped over her armrest. He leaned close, whispering something that made her laugh, the sound high and light. She rested her head against his shoulder for a brief moment, as if they were alone in the world. I froze a few steps away, pulse roaring in my ears. The sight felt unreal, like stumbling into a dream where the people you know act as strangers. I wanted to march over to spit the truth in their faces right then. But instead, I inhaled, slowly turned on my heel, and took a seat a few rows behind, hidden among other passengers. From there, I watched. Claire fiddled with her phone, snapping a discreet photo of their boarding passes, no doubt for some friend eager for gossip. David looked younger, somehow, lighter, as though stepping into a new life. I clenched my jaw. He had shed our years together like an old coat, replaced by the shimmer of novelty. When the gate agent announced boarding, my legs trembled as I stood. David and Claire rose too, joining the priority line. He reached for her hand, fingers brushing in a motion so familiar it twisted my gut. For years, those hands had tucked blankets around our children, fixed leaky faucets, held me through grief. Now they held her instead. Business class rows 1 through 5, the agent called. I followed behind them, boarding pass scanned with a crisp beep. The jet bridge smelled faintly metallic, cool air rushing from the aircraft door ahead. Inside the cabin glowed warmly with muted lighting. Soft instrumental music played as passengers stored bags in overhead bins. David guided Claire toward row 3. She slid gracefully into seat 3A by the window while he took 3B. He laughed at something she whispered, settling comfortably as though the world belonged to them. And then I arrived. "Excuse me," I said evenly, my voice calm but carrying. "That would be 3C. David's head snapped around. His face drained of color so fast I thought he might faint. Claire froze, mouth slightly open, eyes darting between us. "Eleanor," he stammered, voice breaking. I smiled politely, slipping past him into the aisle seat. Small world, isn't it? The cabin seemed to hush around us. Passengers glanced discreetly, sensing the charged air. I tucked my purse under the seat, smoothed my dress, and folded my hands neatly in my lap. David cleared his throat, panic flickering in his eyes. Why are you? Flying to San Francisco, I finished for him, tilting my head. What a coincidence. Must be quite the popular route. Claire shifted uncomfortably, her knuckles white against the armrest. She looked down, avoiding my gaze, but her chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths. The flight attendant approached, cheerful, asking if we needed assistance with bags. David shook his head too quickly, sweat beading at his temple. I caught the attendant's eye, offering a small smile. She glanced at me, then at him, comprehension flickering across her professional mask. When we buckled in, I leaned back, feeling the leather seat cradle me. My heart raced, but my face betrayed nothing. Outside, ground crew loaded luggage, unaware of the theater about to unfold in row 3. David fumbled with his seatbelt, his hands trembling. "This isn't Eleanor, I can explain." I turned, my smile faint, my voice even. "Oh, I'm sure you'll have plenty of time to. After all, it's a 2.5-hour flight." The engines hummed louder, the plane vibrating gently as it prepared for pushback. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the moment settle. This was it. No turning back. The plane taxied slowly toward the runway, a low rumble beneath our feet. Passengers busied themselves with magazines, headphones, half-hearted chatter. But in row 3, the air was sharp as glass. I could feel the weight of David's panic pressing against me, the heat of Claire's shame radiating from the window seat. I didn't move. I let silence do the work. Silence, after all, can cut deeper than any scream. The flight attendant returned, leaning slightly with professional brightness. "Good morning, folks. Can I offer you a pre-flight beverage, champagne orange juice water?" Claire murmured, water, her voice tight, while David fumbled, orange juice. I smiled calmly. "Champagne, please. It's a special occasion." The attendant's eyes flicked to mine with the faintest glimmer of understanding. Of course, ma'am. She disappeared down the aisle, heels clicking softly. David shifted beside me, shoulders stiff. Eleanor, listen, this isn't what it looks like. I tilted my head, my tone deceptively light. Really, because from here it looks like my husband booked a romantic business class getaway with his subordinate. But perhaps I'm mistaken. His mouth opened, then closed. Claire pressed her lips together, cheeks flushed a blotchy pink. She finally whispered, Mrs. Matthews, I didn't mean. I cut her off smoothly. Oh, please, Claire. You meant it every time you picked up the phone at midnight. Every time you giggled over messages that weren't yours to receive. Don't pretend otherwise. You earned this seat, just not in the way you imagined. Her eyes widened, tears threatening. She looked out the window as if the clouds might swallow her whole. The attendant returned with a tray, setting down the flute of champagne in front of me, the orange juice before David, the water for Claire. Here you are, and congratulations again, she said warmly, her gaze steady on me. David froze. Congratulations. I raised my glass delicately. Yes, on discovering that I married a man so unimaginative he couldn't even change his seat number while betraying me. I looked at the attendant. Would you mind introducing me to my seatmates? After all, I am Mr. Matthews's legal wife. A hush rippled through the rows around us. The attendant's smile didn't falter, though her eyes gleamed. She straightened slightly. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mrs. Eleanor Matthews, seated in 3C. She is indeed the legal spouse of Mr. David Matthews here in 3B. The words rang like a gavel. Heads turned subtly from rows behind, whispers fluttered like wings. David's face drained of color, his orange juice trembling in his hand. Claire looked as though she might vanish into the seat cushion. I clinked my glass gently against his, the sound delicate, mocking. To loyalty, David. May we all be so blessed. I sipped slowly, savoring the effervescent burn. He leaned close, his whisper harsh. Eleanor, for God's sake, stop this. People are staring. Good, I whispered back, my smile never fading. Let them. You made your choices in the dark. Now you can live with them in the light. Claire finally broke, voice shaking. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, I thought. I turned on her, my tone icy but measured. You thought what, that he'd leave his wife of 17 years, that the man who lied to me wouldn't someday lie to you? Don't fool yourself. You're not special. You're just convenient. Her tears spilled silently, mascara streaking down her cheeks. The plane roared as it lifted into the sky, pressing us back into our seats. My stomach dipped with the ascent, but my resolve held steady. I sipped my champagne again, the bubbles fizzing like quiet applause in my chest. For the next half hour, I let them squirm. David shifted endlessly, hands twisting his napkin to shreds. Claire dabbed at her eyes, shoulders hunched. I kept my posture, relaxed gaze steady ahead, every inch, the composed wife reclaiming her dignity. At one point, David muttered, "We can talk about this later. Not here." I turned, arching a brow. Later. After your weekend getaway with her. After your boutique hotel and rooftop cocktails. No, David. Later is over. This conversation lives here on this flight with witnesses to remind you that your deceit has consequences. The man across the aisle glanced over, shaking his head slightly, sympathy in his eyes. A woman behind us reached forward at one point, gently squeezing my shoulder. Good for you, she whispered. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Strength wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was the quiet refusal to crumble. As the flight attendants rolled carts down the aisle, David leaned forward, head in his hands. Eleanor, please. You don't understand. Work's been stressful. I made mistakes. Mistakes, I echoed softly. No, a mistake is forgetting an anniversary dinner. A mistake is misplacing paperwork. What you did was deliberate. You chose her. You packed jewelry. You booked 2 tickets. That's not a mistake, David. That's a decision. He looked up, eyes wet, desperate, but I didn't flinch. The rest of the cabin seemed to hold its breath, the hum of the engines the only sound. Claire whispered something to herself, words too low to catch, but her tears didn't stop. I leaned back once more, sipping the last of my champagne. My voice carried just enough for the rows nearby to hear. For 17 years I sat by your side, believing in loyalty. Today I sit beside you once more, but this time I see the truth. And so does everyone else. The glass clinked softly as I set it down on the tray, my hand steady, my heart fierce. The hum of the engines settled into a steady rhythm, a background drone to the silence between us. For most passengers, the flight was ordinary movies flickering on seatback screens, ice clinking in plastic cups, muffled conversations drifting like clouds. But in row 3, time stretched taut, every second weighted with shame and revelation. David slumped beside me, shoulders caved inward, as though he could fold himself out of existence. His orange juice sat untouched, condensation dripping down the plastic cup, pooling onto his tray table. Claire pressed her forehead to the window, as if the endless horizon could offer an escape. I kept my gaze forward, eyes fixed on the seat back ahead. My hands rested calmly in my lap, but inside a storm raged. My pulse pounded against my ribs, my mouth dry despite the champagne I'd sipped. Every memory of our 17 years together replayed in jagged flashes, wedding vows whispered under fairy lights, nights pacing with feverish children, vacations where we held hands on foreign streets. Each image now poisoned, rewritten by the truth, sitting inches away. David broke first. His voice cracked low, barely audible above the drone. "Eleanor, please don't do this here. We'll talk when we land. Just not in front of them." I turned to him slowly, my smile faint but razor sharp. "In front of them? You mean, in front of the people who've seen you laugh with her touch, her lie with every gesture?" "Oh no, David. This is exactly where we'll talk. Because truth doesn't belong in shadows anymore." His jaw clenched. "You're humiliating me." A bitter laugh slipped from my lips. "You humiliated yourself. I'm just making sure you see it clearly." Claire twisted suddenly, her eyes rimmed red. "I didn't," she began, voice trembling. I cut her off. "Don't waste your breath, Claire. You knew. Maybe you told yourself he was miserable. Maybe you believed his little stories. But you saw the ring on his finger. You knew there was a wife at home. Don't pretend ignorance now." Her mouth snapped shut, guilt flushing across her face. For a moment, silence reigned again. Then from across the aisle, a woman with gray, streaked hair leaned slightly forward. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Good for you, honey. Don't let him talk you out of the truth." I swallowed hard, blinking back the sting of tears. Strangers. People I'd never met offering silent solidarity. I wasn't alone, not really. The attendant reappeared, rolling the cart. She paused, eyes flicking between us. "Another champagne, ma'am?" "Yes," I said softly, "and keep the bottle nearby." David groaned, dragging a hand over his face. "Eleanor, please." I raised my glass when the refill arrived, tilting it slightly in his direction. "To clarity," I said. "May we never mistake lies for love again." He flinched as though struck. The hours stretched, punctuated only by the occasional question from the attendant, the shuffle of passengers stretching their legs. Every so often, David tried again, voice breaking. "We can fix this. I'll end it. I'll do counseling, anything." I turned my head, eyes cool. Counseling doesn't unbook 2 tickets. Counseling doesn't unwrap jewelry meant for another woman. Counseling doesn't erase a year of lies. You don't want counseling, David. You want to keep what's convenient without facing what you've destroyed. He sagged, staring at the tray table as if it might swallow him whole. Claire dabbed her eyes, whispering once, "I'm sorry." I leaned slightly toward her, my voice calm. "Don't apologize to me. Apologize to your reflection when you can't sleep at night, because that's who will remind you what you did." Her shoulders shook, and she turned away again, staring at clouds she couldn't reach. The man across the aisle, silent until now, cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I don't know your story, but I'll tell you this. My wife passed last year, and I'd give anything for one more day with her. Don't let anyone make you feel small for demanding respect. You deserve it." Tears burned hot at the corners of my eyes, but I smiled at him. "Thank you," I whispered. For the rest of the flight, I leaned back, watching the patchwork earth drift beneath us through the small oval window beyond Claire's shoulder. My heart still ached, but beneath it something new took root: relief. Relief that the charade was over, that I no longer had to swallow suspicions or doubt my instincts. When the captain announced our descent into San Francisco, the cabin stirred awake, passengers stowing laptops, fastening belts. In row 3, the tension was unbroken. David sat rigid, eyes hollow, while Claire wiped at her mascara-stained cheeks. As the city lights glittered below, I set my empty champagne glass down firmly. My voice was steady, resolute. "When we land, David, you'll collect your things. You'll go wherever you plan to go with her. But don't come home. Not tonight. Not ever. Because the woman you married is gone, and the one sitting beside you now won't accept less than the truth." He turned, desperation etched across his face. But I didn't look back. The wheels touched down with a jolt, the runway rushing past. Applause broke out from scattered passengers the way it sometimes does on landings. But in row 3, it felt like something else entirely, like the curtain had fallen, and the performance was over. The plane shuddered to a halt, reverse thrusters roaring before rolling gently toward the gate. Passengers unbuckled, stretched, began the familiar shuffle of pulling down bags and slipping on jackets. But in row 3, no one moved. David sat with his head in his hands, shoulders hunched, while Claire stared blankly out the window, mascara streaks etched like war paint across her cheeks. I unfastened my belt slowly, savoring the metallic click. My hands didn't tremble. For the first time in months, maybe years, they were steady. The attendant's voice came over the intercom, polite and warm. "Welcome to San Francisco. Local time is 6:42 p.m. Please remain seated until the captain turns off the seatbelt sign." The ding followed a moment later. Passengers surged into motion, but I stayed calm, gathering my purse and carry-on with deliberate grace. David glanced at me, his eyes red-rimmed, pleading. "Eleanor," he whispered, "please don't leave like this. We can—" I stood, cutting him off with a raised hand. "You left long before this flight ever boarded." Gasps whispered around us. Claire flinched, biting her lip as though the truth itself had struck her. I stepped into the aisle, the crowd parting slightly as I moved toward the front. Strangers' eyes followed me, some sympathetic, some admiring, some simply curious. The woman with gray-streaked hair who had spoken earlier gave me a small nod, a silent benediction. The man across the aisle touched his heart briefly, his gaze steady with respect. As I walked off the plane, the air smelled different, brighter, freer. The terminal stretched before me, bustling with families, couples, lone travelers. But I walked alone, head-high heels clicking against the polished floor like punctuation marks to the final sentence of my marriage. At baggage claim, I didn't wait. I didn't watch David and Claire retrieve their shared suitcase. I hailed a cab, gave the driver the address of a hotel I'd booked under my own name, and leaned back as the city blurred past. The Celeste Hotel loomed tall, its windows glowing warmly against the evening sky. Inside, the staff greeted me with polite smiles, unaware of the battle I'd just fought in the air. My suite overlooked the bay, lights dancing across the water like scattered diamonds. I stood before the window, letting the view wash over me. For 17 years, I had been someone's wife, someone's partner, someone's shadow. But now, for the first time, I was simply myself. I unpacked only what I needed: pajamas, toiletries, my notebook. I left the rest zipped tight, as though symbolizing everything from my past I no longer had to open. Then I sat on the bed, phone in hand, and dialed my lawyer's number. His voice was surprised but professional when I explained. By the time I hung up, the first steps toward divorce had begun. The days that followed blurred with phone calls, Documents, quiet tears behind closed doors. But each morning I woke lighter. The burden of suspicion, of lies, of pretending everything was fine, it had all lifted. David tried, of course. Voicemails poured in, flowers delivered, even long emails full of promises. I deleted each one unread. He had spent too many months crafting words for someone else. None of his words could reach me now. A week later, my sister visited. We sat on my new apartment's balcony, mugs of tea warming our hands. She listened quietly as I recounted the flight, the confrontation, the silence afterward. When I finished, she placed her hand over mine. "You were braver than most," she said. "Some women never leave. Some never demand respect. You did both." Her words didn't erase the ache, but they stitched something inside me back together. Months passed. I returned to work, poured myself into projects I had neglected while chasing the illusion of a faithful marriage. I joined a weekend photography class, filling rolls of film with city streets, wildflowers, the way sunlight curved across strangers' faces. Each photo felt like proof that beauty still existed even after betrayal. One afternoon, while setting up for a student seminar, I heard a familiar voice in the hallway. "Mrs. Matthews." I turned. Ethan Wallace, a colleague of mine from years back, stood there with a shy smile. We had once collaborated on a community project, nothing more than polite acquaintances. But now his voice sounded like possibility. We talked for over an hour, catching up on lost years. There was no rush, no pressure, only the comfort of two people who knew the cost of life's storms. Slowly, over the weeks that followed, our conversations grew into dinners, our dinners into laughter that filled spaces once empty. I didn't leap into love again, I walked. Carefully, honestly, without illusions. And with every step, I remembered the lesson that flight had burned into me. Loyalty cannot be begged or bargained. It must be chosen freely every day. A year after that fateful night in row 3, I stood at another gate, boarding pass in hand. This time, I wasn't chasing anyone or proving anything. I was flying toward a conference where I would speak about leadership and resilience. My reflection in the airport window looked different, still lined with years but glowing with hard-earned peace. As the announcement called my group, I smiled. I was no longer a woman defined by betrayal. I was Eleanor Matthews, whole, unbroken, free. And if anyone asked me about that infamous flight, I would simply say, sometimes the hardest journeys don't begin when the plane takes off. They begin when you decide not to live in silence anymore. To those listening, what would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed quiet or demanded the truth in the open air? Share your thoughts below. And if my story reminded you of your own strength, don't forget to follow for more stories of resilient survival and the courage it takes to walk away.